Well, hello, everybody. It's Barb Katie here, and it's another happy Monday here in the hills of West Virginia. I hope you're having a good start to your week as well. Uh, Today, I think what I'd like to discuss with you a little bit is something that I sometimes struggle with. It's multitasking. I don't know if you use that term in your life, but it pops up in mine from time to time. Last March, I had read an article in the New York Times about multitasking and whether it's a good thing, a bad thing, if it's real, if it's not real, is it the most efficient thing that you can do, and some of the complications that arise from attempting to multitask. Um, I, from what the experts say, and who are they, the experts, but what they say, and I find it true only for me, I can't speak for you. I don't do two things at the same time really well. I tend to be sort of a linear person. I like to do one thing, uh, try to get it to a certain point where I can take a break or to completion and then pick up something else. That's my preferred way of operating in my day to day life. Uh, I know some people feel a real pressure to multitask. When I felt the highest pressure to multitask was when I was rearing my boys, because it seemed like every time I turned around, there was something else that needed to be added to the pile of things that I was trying to manage. Uh, when I went back to school, that was another time where I just, it seemed like it got added onto the top of the heap. And then when I started working again, another layer kept on. And all of a sudden, I just, sort of put on the brake and looked around and said, hey, what is going on here? What am I trying to do to myself? And is this really the best approach for me? And especially if I'm trying to attempt something new, that I'm learning or I want to add to my routine or whatever, uh, trying to add it when my plate of life is already full to overflowing doesn't always seem to be the best way to go about it for me. There's a sense of pride, I think, when we say we multitask, as if we've defied human nature by completing more than one high level brain skill at a time, rendering us both superhuman and incredibly efficient. Um, how often do you text when you're stuck in traffic? Lose track of a podcast when you're doing some other chore. Uh, Flutter between the news and your inbox in the evening when you're getting ready to call it a night. Are you really focusing in on attending to whatever it might be? I know sometimes if you get bored at night, I find that I tend to multitask much more. I'm flitting back and forth between all different kinds of things to ward off boredom. But does that really ward it off, or is it just trying to keep my brain occupied in a dozen different directions at the same time? And is that really the most helpful thing I can do for myself? Um, I think there's a lot of social expectation these days on uh, multitasking and being able to do many different things at the same time in our modern world, where especially if you spend a lot of your time in front of a screen, like a computer screen or a phone screen or whatever. It seems there's a real pressure to flit here, flit there, look here, check there. The fact remains that I'm not doing a great job at it, and it's not really great for me. Uh, I think I have learned this year in particular, when my plate of life really did get very full for a while, that I needed to be smarter in my approach. Uh, my multitasking even is sort of a misnomer. Uh, Again, these experts say that you cannot possibly do two things at once unless you can do one without much thinking, like breathing in and out and walking. Those are sort of, physiological automatic things that you can be doing. They don't take a lot of thinking, that you're sort of on all autopilot there. Uh, One thing I have learned is I need to stick with my strengths if I'm going to try to multitask. Uh, Things that I can do habitually without requiring any thinking, I can add onto something else. Like I can take a walk with a good friend and we can catch up with each other. Uh, I can ride my stationary bike while I listen to an audiobook or to some kind of music. Uh, that's a type of multitasking. Uh, but certain activities really do put a strain on our brain. And that's not the best situation in which to find yourself, especially if you're wanting to add things, to make changes, to make adaptations in the way you normally go about your everyday activities, uh, and produce different results. If a task is stressful or requires a lot of mental effort, when doing it by itself, uh, I'm definitely not better off multitasking. And what I mean when I say that is, just to give you an example, I have a really great friend that crochets wonderfully well. And she can just crochet, have a conversation with you, and watch TV. But a beginner probably needs to really concentrate to avoid skipping stitches. I know for myself, and this sounds really stupid and funny, uh, but it's true. When I was learning to bowl, I could not even chew gum and throw the bowling ball because I got distracted. I would not know where my steps were supposed to go, where my hand was supposed to be in relationship to the ball and the lane. I mean, it was really funny. And my friends would say to me that were on my team, Barb, stick your chewing gum in your cheek. Don't try to walk down that lane and throw that ball until you do. And they were absolutely right. It was a new skill I was learning, and I needed to really focus on it, not try to multitask, even with something as simple as chewing gum. Uh, it made the tasks much more difficult. Uh, just think about cooking dinner. From the moment I decide what to make, there are all different areas in my brain trying to collaborate to make dinner happen. Uh, the network includes areas of my brain that are involved in the ability to plan and carry out some goal-oriented behavior, putting food on the table for the family to eat. Uh, Together, they create a mental model of the job at hand and what I need to accomplish to make this happen. My brain draws external information and internal information, like what ingredients do I have in the pantry and in the fridge? Do I remember the recipe? It's sort of like drawing on a mental whiteboard, writing all this out in my brain. But if one of my friends calls to talk about her day, that whiteboard for dinner, can be just totally wiped out. And I'm like, oh, every time I switch attention to a new task, my brain has to reorient itself. Even if I've made a dish 100 times, there's no guarantee if she has something really important she's wanting to share with me, and I'm attending to her and listening to her, then I'll remember if I added salt or if I added baking soda. And I'm staring there because it makes a whole lot of difference in the recipe, trying to remember what I should have put in and if I, in fact, did put that ingredient in. Um, that's what I'm talking about here when there is a danger in trying to multitask. Every time I switch that attention, my brain has to reorient. Am I really sure that I am doing exactly what I need to do, or has my brain lost the ability to keep track of the things that I'm sorting out? Is information competing that may, in fact, mess up the end result I had in mind? The biggest downside for me when it comes to multitasking, and we're switching back and forth in with our thoughts, is what I call the switch cost. Uh, I go slower. I'm usually less accurate than I would have been if I just focused on the one thing. Uh, I'm not as fast. It taxes the working memory I have to keep going. And my brain actually gets tired, depending on, how time sensitive this is. Pressure can even rise to uh, uh, get it done right. I might get a little anxious. It may even dampen my mood and negatively impact my perception of what I'm doing. Uh, so focusing on one thing at a time is, to me, the better choice. Uh, I took a look at how many times throughout the day, noticing when and how I task switch without realizing. And quite frankly, I was amazed at how often I did switch. Sort of like changes horses in the middle of a stream, for goodness sake. And it was a challenge to quit doing that because multitasking, quote, had gotten to be sort of a habit. What I discovered when I began to look at this is I need to start practicing monotasking, uh, on doing one thing at a time to uh, retrain my focus and my ability to focus and build up a tolerance to all the distractions that tend to want to draw you into that multitasking situation. What I started doing was starting really, really small. Uh, you know, I tend to be one of these people that I want to lay out a full plan of everything when I'm going to make a change. Like, it's not just simply doing one specific thing, it's doing it all at once. And the more things you change at the same time, the more chaotic things become because you don't know where to put your focus, and you need to focus everywhere that you're trying to make these changes. So I started very small with something that I could define as separate, and I picked that one thing. I picked a time that was usually a relatively calm time each day to really hone in on this and think about it. And I found out that just going slow and being steady and being persistent was a really good strategy for me. I started out trying to stay focused on that one thing, and all it meant for 5 minutes. Could I do it for 5 minutes? Could I do it for 10 minutes without being interrupted or drawn away to do something else that wasn't uh, in that framework? Could I make it until I completed the task or until I found that break point? Uh, I think we always, when we're looking at stuff like this and how important focus is in accomplishing any goals we have set for ourselves, is to sort of consider the risks. Uh, some things we do are just like second nature, but there are still times when you want your wits about you. I have driven a car since I was the day I turned 16 years old. I have driven a car. That I would say is pretty much second nature to me. However, even if I feel I can do it without paying really close attention because I've done it for so long, I cannot predict the unpredictable nature of the world in which I live. I don't know when some distracted driver is going to come in my path, swerve into my lane, and require my full concentrated attention to avoid an accident. So that if you've ever almost had someone hit you or you've almost hit someone, you know what I'm talking about. Uh, just a couple of days ago, I was crossing an intersection in the town I live, and we don't have high traffic here. Uh, the light had turned green. I saw the light turn green. And what is my first reaction? My first reaction is to take my foot off the brake and put my foot on the accelerator after I've looked both ways. Well, had I been distracted, I would have not seen the driver coming from my right, barreling through the intersection, running a red light, and I ended up maybe 2 feet from hitting her because she stopped in the middle of the intersection. And I looked at her like, what? But she had been multitasking. I'm not going to make a comment about cell phones. You know where that leads to. Uh, but the point is, we can't predict. So there are times when we just need to make sure that we weigh the risk of letting our minds wander into other areas, depending on the activity. Not all activities are of equal importance or equal predictability. I also have learned that I'm much better off whatever task I'm taking on because life is you can't anticipate everything all the time, every single day, but to plan your work so that you have break points. Uh, when and how we switch our tasks does matter. Don't pivot at the drop of a distraction. That's what I call a squirrel brain moment. You just went off on a tangent there. Don't ask me why. Find places in whatever you're doing where you can just say, hold on a second, let me get to this point and then put it down so you can give your full focus attention on whatever else has just flown in your window without having to go back and try to find the place where you stopped and ending up having to do redundant work. That's one really helpful thing for me is to find those break points in order to keep myself focused. When it comes to multitasking, I think it really does make us less efficient because we keep having to shift back and forth in our thought process and reset. Uh, Adding more to a never-ending multitask list makes me tired before I even start because I've got all these bits and pieces that I don't have a pattern to or a plan for. My brain has to turn off the rules of what I was doing before and turn on the rules of what now I've decided has to be done right this moment, depending on the goal. And this doesn't just happen simultaneously. It's sort of a linear process. You have to focus then you have to go to activation, and then you have to repeat the process every time you have to reset yourself. Um, for me, my best tips in staying focused as I go through any changes, and we all have changes we want to make in our lives, is to resist the temptation to divert our attention once we have focused in on something. Uh, is there something pulling your attention elsewhere? Maybe we could write it down and give ourselves time later on to tend to that particular task. Does it really have a sense of urgency and immediacy to pull us off what we were already doing? Sometimes the answer is going to be yes, sometimes it's going to be no, but just consider it. This way, it is out of your mind and you can remain focused on your current task at hand. Um, yeah, it can be challenging, but it also helps strengthen your ability to prioritize. And after practice, I found it gets a lot easier. It's just, it's like the rule of my house with the kids was if they came in, Mom, 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 first thing I looked for was blood. If there was no blood, then I thought, well, maybe you could just wait a minute until I put uh, the dish rag up or the set the clothes basket down so I didn't fly everything all over the floor. Uh, so resent the temptation to just be diverted instantly. Look at it with a critical mind. Set a time allotment for any given task. Uh, and assign yourself firm perimeters for the specific task will help you remain focused to complete it before being tempted to switch to something else. If the other task continues to tempt you or call for your attention, give it a start time so you have something to look forward to. Your brain loves rewards. And if you can say, well, okay, let's complete this and then let's go do that because we really love doing that. And it's sort of a reward for your brain. Uh, Set reasonable expectations. Before just eagerly agreeing to do something, take a moment to consider what is already on your plate of life. Often, in my desire, because I like to be a people pleaser, that puts me in a situation where my priorities were placed on the burner in order to attempt to please somebody else that could have waited. To be perfectly honest, they could have waited. There was no necessity for me to say, well, I must do this for you before I finish doing this that needed to be done for whatever other reason. Uh, it can be a fantastic feeling to help someone and produce those results for them immediately. But I think you need to question that is your own is that your own expectation or that of the person asking? Take a moment to think about a reasonable time frame to complete the task without neglecting what's important to you as well and what may be something that is critical for you and others depending on you. Um, for me, the chaos that can ensue from multitasking really can be alleviated from my life uh, when I tend to focus on single tasking or monotasking. That way, I don't feel drained and unproductive. And at the end of the day, I feel more accomplished. I actually feel more efficient. And I find energy to spare that I then can share with those around me, and all of us win. So stay focused on what's most important for you. And remember, you are important too. So, with that, I'm going to say, have a great day, and I will talk to you later. Bye for now.